into the city. I have managed it in 2 other cities as well. So I feel comfortable with it transitioning to us. We've had internal dialogues about it for about the past year, maybe, in terms of some things that we were seeing with the decentralization of code enforcement and the different departments trying to do their own code enforcement and not leveraging our resources as efficiently as we could. So currently it is in the police department, it is decentralized, so we're all looking to sort of enforce our own code. So in my world, the zoning ordinance and the building codes, it falls on our team to enforce those. The police department's enforcing the nuisances that are in the McMinnville City Code. And between those 2 different tracks, we were kind of experiencing some inefficiencies, because if my team is a dedicated planning team and they're not really set up to do code enforcement or move forward that process, those things were falling through the tracks. And we were having some crossover communications as well, trying to implement the program and provide the customer service. The other thing that's happening is right now it's a civil process, so it is embedded in the court system. Some communities choose to move forward in that direction or choose to move forward with an administrative program. Our recommendation to you tonight is to look at, with the transition to the planning department, to look at making it a more centralized program, so we're serving all the departments, and make it an administrative process as well. The purpose behind that is to provide better customer service, to provide better efficiencies, and then also to be more timely in terms of getting compliance on the non-compliant issues. The difference between what the police department and the planning department would be doing moving forward is the planning department will assume the code enforcement for both the planning and building codes, but also the nuisances that are in the McMinnville City Code. It is not intended that the planning department will do traffic infractions, will do anything related to vehicles on the public right-of-way, or any sort of criminal person-on-person behavior. So usually those types of code enforcement cases are property upkeep, and I provided you with a before and after picture of what that means in terms of debris. There's a lot of, this time of year we're dealing with overgrown vegetation a lot, so that's weeds that you see all around the community. And the reason why most communities have that as a nuisance is twofold. It's aesthetic, but it's also a fire hazard as well in a dry environment. So why now? Why make this transition? It seemed to make sense. The police department was going through a transition with staffing. We had one of our code enforcement officers take a position with another agency, and we also had the other position open. So we had 2 positions that were open. We weren't impacting individuals. So we started talking about maybe this is the time to make that transition. It's also not a life safety represented position. You say this better than I do, Jeff, in terms of our police union is really looking at life safety issues and coming in when during those types of crises, and the code enforcement doesn't fall into that same category. So we had a discussion with the union about that, about taking it out of the union and putting it into the planning department, and they agreed with that as well. So the value of code compliance, I like to talk about it from a perspective of community relations and code compliance rather than code enforcement. And I would recommend we change the program name accordingly, is we're really looking at implementing the plans that the community put together. So the community's put together plans for how they want the community to be. We have codes to support those plans. And then code enforcement is really how we're all sort of playing in the sandbox together to get to the community goals and vision. Without code enforcement is really what sort of transforms, you know, the quote I have in here is code enforcement is part of the equation that transforms a town from a politically designated area into a community. So it's really taking it to the next level of achieving those minimum standards that we've all established for ourselves. It's not a criminal program. It's really a good neighbor program by playing in the same set of rules for everybody's benefit. The codes that you enforce under code enforcement are the comprehensive plan policies. That's the governing document for all of this. And then the municipal code, the zoning ordinance, and the building code. The building code in Oregon's a state code, so we all abide by the same state code. but it is enforced locally first, and it then can be enforced by the state as well. Code enforcement personnel, what makes them good at what they do is that they need to know the code, usually backwards and forwards, understand the intent of it and how to apply it, understand where their authority is to enforce it, understand the reasons behind the code so that they can, share that with who they're talking to, work with residents to help them comply, and then enforce the code equitably to all properties and property owners. And that's really important, so it doesn't seem like we are, targeting certain property owners versus others, politicizing the code enforcement, so to speak. So why do you have code enforcement in a community? This was important for me to sort of talk about because it's my value system and how I help lead a code enforcement program. But to me, I believe that code enforcement protects and improves land values. It decreases the number of attractive nuisances. It improves public safety. So a lot of the nuisances we have in the McMinnville City Code are respective to public safety issues. Rats are one of those, and rats, a new code for me in terms of nuisance that I'm going to have to learn. I look forward to that. It increases the sense of community, so it really can help bring about a sort of pride of place amongst property owners. It improves the public image. It improves quality of life. It reduces health threats. And then it increases economic development investment. So anybody who's worked in code enforcement, when you drive into a new community, can tell whether there's a good code enforcement program underway or one that's not as good, because there's all these little signs that you can see driving around in that regard. And often I've seen a code enforcement program, and when it's well implemented, it becomes community compliance. People are working with each other, and the standards, the minimum standards, are just being raised by all in that regard. In terms of compliance, the goal is voluntary, so it's not meant to be a penal program. It is really getting to voluntary compliance. Most communities have performance measurements relative to that. In Redmond, our voluntary compliance goal was 88%. We normally were achieving 96%, and we were administering about 1,600 cases a year. So it was really, and to get to voluntary compliance, it's really a lot about education, communication, information, having relationships with people. A lot of people don't even know they're not compliant with the code, or if they're notified that they're not compliant with the code, don't really know how to easily become compliant with the code either. And so providing all those sort of pathways for them make it easier for them. But there is non-voluntary compliance. There's always those people who just don't want to. And so then you do need to go into some sort of judicial process with citations, and cities normally at some point in time will take a role of abatement as well. So the nuisance is in place for a reason. We need to remove the nuisance. City abates it and then gets full cost, seeks to achieve full cost recovery from the property owner for the abatement. So in terms of the process, the goal is compliance in a timely manner. So if somebody is not compliant with the code, but it drags on for a long time, that's not achieving that community value. That's the whole reason why we're putting this together. So we used to have in Redmond the 21-day test. That was our goal for getting to compliance, either through a voluntary program or through a punitive program. And I'll walk you through what that means, because this is similar to what we're talking about internally in terms of bringing back to you an administrative program. So we're looking at, based on your direction tonight, going in and making amendments to the McMinnville City Code so we can set up an administrative program that has this type of process in it to get to this type of timeliness. So the first step is to notify. You need to notify the property owner of the code violation. And in the first 10 days, that's when we're trying to achieve the voluntary compliance in that 21-day test. So someone will notify the city that there's a code violation taking place. And then we'll go out and investigate it, and we decide yes or no. Then if we find a violation, we then send a letter to the owner telling them what the violation is and how they should rectify it. At day 10, we go back to the property and inspect it to see if it's been rectified or not. If it hasn't been rectified and it's still in violation of city code, then we go into a judicial process and we can issue an administrative citation. And we would set that up in the McMinnville City Code to be able to do so. The administrative citation is a financial penalty, and it can be administered on a daily basis. Or we can choose two different tracks. These are all tools to get to compliance. So you can do the citation tool. You can do the citation tool and send a certified letter telling them that they need to abate the property by a certain time, or the city will abate it and then charge them for the abatement. Or you can choose one or the other if you think one of them will get there more effectively. In Redmond, we chose to fall on the certified letter to get to abatement, and that we would abate if they didn't, rather than the citation process. We used that as sort of a last-ditch effort, and that was a policy from City Council in terms of how they wanted to deploy that type of tool. The certified letter is sent, and in another 10 days, the property is re-inspected. If it still has, so we're now at day 20, if it still hasn't been abated, then we bring in a vendor to do the abatement, and then we then charge the property owner for a full cost recovery of that abatement. In the certified letter that we sent them, we let them know how much we think it's going to be so that they understand that the full cost recovery is not just the bill that we got from the landscaping company to come in and cut down the weeds. It's actually the bill from the landscaping company plus our time, plus finance time, plus everybody's time it took to touch that and make it happen, because it's not the taxpayer's responsibility to pay for a property owner's non-compliance. So it costs more to the property owner. Then we would go through a process of collections on that. Collections are, depending on the property owner, is a pretty easy process, but there will be some who won't pay for it, and typically cities will enter into a lien program, which would be our recommendation to you, where we would put a lien on the property for the amount of the full cost recovery of that abatement, and then when the property sells, the city would collect that lien. I have discovered that when you have this program and you implement it in a fair and transparent manner, and people start to learn about it, that the bluffing goes away, so to speak, that they start to participate more willingly. In terms of process, we talk a lot in code enforcement about complaint-based code enforcement, but there's also a systematic code enforcement program, and that's really intentional, and it can be used as a fairly positive tool. And so I've seen the program work in both ways, where we respond to a complaint, but maybe there's times when the city makes an intentional decision to go in and do this systematic code enforcement program. And sometimes that's for neighborhood revitalization. So if there's a neighborhood that's that we've identified that we want to revitalize and it's blighted because of nuisances, then we go in and we do this systematic code enforcement program. It's also a great way to work with an engaged neighborhood. So if a neighborhood's approaching the city and saying, we have these issues in our neighborhood, we'd like your help partnering with us to reduce these issues, and there are nuisances in our code, we go in and we partner with them for that. We also have used it in some communities. We did this in Nampa, Idaho, where I worked. We used it in neighborhoods where we had significant crime happening, property crime, because just like graffiti, if we're able to remove some of the blight that is the property nuisances, it sometimes can alleviate those crime issues as well. And then if we're getting a large amount of complaints in a singular neighborhood, it makes more sense for us to just go across the board in the whole neighborhood and do a systematic approach. My recommendation moving forward as we administer the program is that we use that tool at different times when it makes sense. I also think another very important part of a code compliance program is community relations. So we were talking in our department today about code enforcement, and it has a very negative connotation. But if it's done, I've seen it done in some communities where it's a very positive program because people see the results of it and appreciate the results. And there's also the opportunity to establish community relations. So sometimes people just cannot afford or physically maintain the upkeep of a property. So they either don't have the income to do it, or they just aren't physically able. So senior citizens who aren't mobile. And they want to, and they're embarrassed. and they've been, and they've now been notified and they don't know how to respond. If we put together some programs, and I don't know if we have these here yet today or not, but there's ways to do adopt-a-home programs where you work with youth service groups or adult service groups where they are willing to come out on a day and adopt a home and help that property owner get their property back into compliance if it's debris in the yard or overgrown vegetation. There's also ways to do it as a community, as a whole. There's national programs for Brush Up McMinnville, where one day we, as a community, have 1,000 volunteers that go out and paint homes that are in disrepair for qualifying property owners who can't afford to do it themselves. There's communities that do rake-up programs, fence-up programs, and tire collection days as well. I provided to you in the PowerPoint an example of programs in Nampa that we used to use there that are still used today. Brush Up Nampa is an annual event, and that right now has about 2,000 volunteers that participate on that day to go out and paint homes in the community. And it's all volunteer based. So the paint supply stores are providing the paint, the volunteers are providing the labor, and there's a pre-qualification program. And it's become a very big event there. So our proposal to you tonight is to evaluate the codes, so our zoning ordinance, McMinnville City Code, for nuisances. So just like the business license code, see if it's up to date, if it needs to be reevaluated, and look at it for code compliance issues. And then to amend the code to create this administrative code compliance process where we can do the notification and the administrative citations, and then the abatement and collection if we need to. And then to create the centralized program in the planning department, and to develop a community relations program somewhere down the road as part of this overall program. We would, in terms of next steps, bring the amended code to you, City Council, for adoption. We see that happening in a couple of months probably. David, Matt, and I want to sort of sit down with the code and look at it and figure out what's working, what's not working. Develop a fee schedule so that we can do the administrative citations, and then hire a code compliance officer team. So we have 2 current vacancies. They're out right now. They were out. They just recently closed, and we got 16 applications, which is good. I was worried about that. We have a lead co-compliance officer position, and then a entry-level one. We're going to be reviewing those and doing interviews here over the next 2 to 3 weeks, and hopefully hiring 2 new people for those positions that want to move the program forward. So implementation, we would implement it with a positive approach. I'm not saying it's not positive now, but that's sort of my value system that I bring to the program. We would involve the community. We would take a measured approach, so not, blanket across. There's some sign compliance issues in the city outside of the large signs. There's other sign compliance issues where I just want to go out and say, okay, let's just clean this up. But we really need to bring it in incrementally, because there's been practices that have been occurring for years due to staffing resources in the planning department to be able to tackle that. And then develop an online communication portal. So setting up, just like we did with our ADA program, an opportunity for people to go to the website and provide a complaint on the website, which goes directly to the code compliance team, and they can respond to that. I'd also like to set up a dedicated phone line where people can call in their complaints as well. So that there becomes a regular process for where people call with their complaints, so it's going into a very targeted reception area for that. Because I think we're all getting complaints at different times right now. So I don't know if the chief wants to add anything, or David, but that's kind of the high-level presentation to you tonight to tell you what we're thinking about and how we want to move forward with the program. And I'm sure Matt has a bunch of those too.
When the city manager and Heather approached us a number of months ago, and I really think that this is coming from Mac, this is all I've known is that the code enforcement's come out of the PD, and it just is what it is. But in talking with Heather and talking with Jeff, it makes so much more sense. The code is so much more comprehensive than just really what we were dealing with. I think that moving forward with this is, obviously, I think the citizens are going to get a better service. I think they're going to be more timely. And I think it's time to, I think, as Heather's recommended, is really take a look at that code and the process with which we're getting people into compliance. And if they're not going into compliance, how we're getting them into a court, or an administrative process, which I think makes more sense, much more sense than the way it's currently sitting. Right now, it's very complex. It's very time consuming. I just really think that this is the best direction. And so kudos to Jeff and Heather for bringing this forward. I really think it is a step in the right direction.
Thank you, Matt.
For the record, Jeff brought it forward. I didn't raise my hand for this.
So this is a pretty significant change in how we would handle compliance in McMinnville, and so one of our suggestions is that in addition to the code work and operational methods that we talk about over the next couple of months, that we schedule a work session before the issue comes back to the council for any additional action. So you'd probably get another crack at this in an informal setting where we'd talk in more detail about what the process might look like. We could give you examples of what the notices would be, we could even come up with a couple of sort of pilot examples and show you how an administrative process might look different than what we've done historically in this community. So I expect probably a work session at some point in the summer or maybe early fall, depending on our timing.
A couple of months then.
Yeah, I think it's probably going to be a couple of months.
Yeah, I think it'd be good to bring the code into a work session because it'll be pretty complex and nuanced, and it'd be good to work through in that type of, have the time to work through it and answer the questions.
Okay.
Funding with 2 positions.
So there are the 2 positions that were already existed in the police department historically that just sort of transitioned over into the planning department. So when you see the planning fund and it's increased so much this year, a lot of that's due to the fact that code enforcement's moved over. So it's cost neutral to the city.
I'd like to get a read from the council at this time. Adam, would you like to respond as well?
I would definitely support seeing another work session and looking at it administratively with our current position. And it seems like there's definitely some room for process improvement and a better product coverage.
Sal?
A little louder.
Please, I feel the same way.
Okay, thank you. Alan?
I would look forward to a work session. I have some questions on practicality of it. And the question of orders to emotional condition, people who are orders, they don't see messes like we see. And so it's, I just wonder how that's going to play in. So I'm looking forward to some more discussion on it, to see where it would make a difference. Let's say if someone doesn't want to comply, the same laws of the land would apply to that situation that we have now versus if the planning department takes it. So I'm looking forward to some good conversations on that, see if it's really worthwhile.
Remy, I'm sorry.
Ever forward.
All right, Wendy.
I had a question for Jeff. The idea for this, did it come from previous experience in other communities that have done it with this?
So yes, so there's been a compliance program in every jurisdiction where I've worked. In the last 2 places I worked, Lane County and Springfield, we had active compliance programs, both of which had 90+% voluntary compliance.
One was judicial, court-driven in nature like ours has been historically, and the other was an administrative civil penalty process, as we've talked about today. My experience working in both of those is that the administrative civil penalty process gets to voluntary compliance more quickly, and when you don't get voluntary compliance, when you have to go through a penalty process, you get to compliance more quickly there too. You can get a case resolved. And that doesn't mean some cases don't drag on for years, because there are sort of frequent flyers everywhere that you may have to deal with on a regular basis. But my experience was that the administrative process can move more quickly, and it's also less politicized than a court process can be.
Great. Well, I love the idea of it. I think that taking it into the planning department and being proactive and focusing on voluntary compliance and education through the processes will help it to be less adversarial from the start. If we're being real proactive, and I think it probably also psychologically will feel better. The police department, you feel like you're in trouble already, right? Whereas the code enforcement officer can be more of like helping on the same team type of thing from the beginning. So I think that placement might help us as well. And I always like process improvement, so it sounds like there's a lot of process improvement that would go along with this evaluation. So I'm looking forward to another work session on it. I think it's a great idea.
I want to make sure I state for the record, I don't think anyone on the internal team doesn't think that we don't currently have a good code enforcement program and that the police aren't doing a good job. The problem was we didn't have planning and building codes being enforced, and so we had some discussion about how can we do a fuller program with the same resources. And that's where that was coming from, but there's no value statement being made.
Yeah. I was just thinking of it from the standpoint of the citizens.
Yeah, it's a
the
different...
citizens, when you have a police officer that shows up, I'm sure there's a feeling that they have that they're in trouble. I mean, like not, it's a different emotional reaction that they might have than somebody that's code enforcement from the planning department. But yeah, I don't know. I wasn't trying to make that statement either.
Okay, David, do you want to?
I was going to respond to Councilor Stassen's comment. Right now, when somebody is not voluntarily complying, they're getting a citation into the municipal court, and they're appearing in court alongside. They're really appearing as a part of a criminal process, and it really is a very different feel. You've got the city attorney's office that gets involved in it at times, and it does not, once it gets there, it does not lend itself to a very good abatement in getting people to work with the city to get into compliance. And that's one of the reasons why I think we're very excited about helping to move this process forward and getting it out of our municipal court process.
And for those reasons, I'm excited about it also. Thank you for the presentation, Heather. It sounds to me like we have a consensus that we definitely would like you to go do some more work on it and come back to us soon. So we're on to car camping, and I believe that's you too.
Yes.
And I think we have the overhead slides.
You email for me with that one as well.
Yeah, so just look for your emails that came in the last hour or so.
So tonight we wanted to bring to you the concept of a proposed ordinance to allow car camping in McMinnville under certain circumstances on private property with provisions provided by code. It models the Eugene program that we've heard a little bit about recently when we invited St. Vincent de Paul and other Eugene team members here to McMinnville to talk to us about it. And it's a recommendation that's coming forward to you from the Affordable Housing Task Force. It originated in the Housing for Homelessness Subcommittee. They have 4 different population groups that they're working on, and vehicular homeless was one of them. And that's where this first idea came from for this car camping ordinance, and when we started exploring what was so successful in Eugene. And then they made a recommendation that went up to the Affordable Housing Task Force, who voted formally on this at their last meeting to bring it to City Council. Remy, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that?
I might have some things to add, but probably not right now.
Okay.
Students.
Okay. So tonight we want to talk a little bit about the program structure that's being recommended. The program provides a car camping opportunity on private property for homeless. The city's role is establishing the enabling ordinance to allow it to happen. The property owner actually assumes the liability for it. And then the Champion team, one of our local partners, has been in dialogue about providing the voluntary site management for the property owner, but that would be a relationship between the Champion team and the property owner. It's those two groups. So it's really, we struggle with what's the role of the different entities as we talk through homelessness in McMinnville, and this is something where we felt like the city can really come forward in its established role in terms of putting together policies and procedures to enable a program to happen for our volunteers to participate in. So the intention of the program is not to establish a permanent residential solution in terms of car camping on private property. It's really to provide a safe place for people to stay for a period of time, to advance towards shelter, and to do it in a discrete installations around the community. The city's role is to establish the policies and procedures that enable that program, and the policies and procedures are focusing on program success, so how to ensure that the program is successful, and also mitigation of negative impact to neighboring properties. So a lot of our code issues are looking at, adjacent properties and how to mitigate negative impact to them. What the ordinance does is it describes what is prohibited. So we've had some confusion about what's allowed and not allowed. So this describes very succinctly what is prohibited, and then it also describes what is allowed and where it is allowed and how it, what the different rules that need to be followed so that it is allowed. In terms of what's prohibited, the code recommendation is that overnight sleeping is not allowed on sidewalks, streets, alleys, public right-of-way, the parks, or any other publicly owned property unless specifically allowed by ordinance. And then special events can be exempted by the city manager, and that's going to be part of the code, and I'll walk you through that. What is allowed is permitted overnight sleeping will be allowed on properties in the following ways. On commercial and industrial property that is currently occupied and has a parking lot, so there's a structure in a parking lot on the property. 3 vehicles or less would be allowed to camp there for overnight sleeping, but it does need to occur on a parking lot. Religious institutions, same thing, 3 vehicles or less, and again, needs to be on a parking lot with a structure. In residential properties, there's the allowance for a family to camp in the backyard of a residence or a family to camp in the driveway in a vehicle. And then on vacant property, there's the opportunity for 3 vehicles or less to camp on a vacant property. However, because those properties aren't, people aren't interfacing with them on a day-to-day basis, the recommendation is that those need to be registered with the city so that we're aware that the property owner is giving permission for that to occur, and that it be part of a supervised program of some sort. The site provisions, to be able to allow people to camp on the property, there's following site provisions are required. There needs to be dedicated sanitary facilities for the campers. There needs to be dedicated garbage disposal services for the campers. There needs to be a storage area for personal items. For anybody that's a family that's camping in the backyard of the residence, they need to be in a tent or a camping shelter, and it must be 5 feet away from the property line. And that the property owner cannot require any fee, rent, or other monetary charge for overnight sleeping. The property owner's rights and responsibilities are that they may revoke the permission at any time and for any reason, and any person who had received permission to use the property shall leave the property immediately. The city may impose administrative civil penalties on property owners who fail to comply with the ordinance, so that's preparing for this future. code compliance program with administrative citations. Other provisions of the recommended ordinance is that the city manager may prohibit overnight, city manager or the city manager's designee may prohibit overnight sleeping if the city finds that the activity is incompatible with adjacent properties or constitutes a nuisance. The city can, and then how do you describe that? So the city can adopt administrative rules outside of the ordinance to implement any part of this particular ordinance. So if there's more details that we want to work through as sort of standard operating procedures for decision-making, we're setting up this pathway for administrative rules, very similar to Oregon statutes in the administrative rules. The city manager may authorize overnight sleeping associated with a special event. And there's a statement in the code, there was some discussion at the task force meeting about liability. If the city's enabling this program, does the city then become liable if anything happens to somebody on the property or the property itself? There's a statement recommended to go into the ordinance that says that nothing in the code creates any duty on the part of the city or its agents to ensure the protection of persons or property with regard to the permitted overnight sleeping. So the code really sets up the program where the sanitation facilities come from or the dedicated garbage disposal services. The committee has been working on that in a volunteer capacity. So Recology has agreed to provide the dedicated garbage disposal services. And we have had a private business owner, actually Rudin Construction, has stepped up and said they will sponsor 2 porta potties for 2 sites. We would then go out and see if anybody else wants to sponsor them as well as properties become available. The intent is that we would let people know that the program is being enabled by the city, invite property owners to come forward who are interested in exploring and participating in it, letting them know what the provisions are, and then if they choose that they want to have some site management of the property, so someone looking in, making sure that the people who are giving permission to do the overnight sleeping on that property have been vetted in some way and are in dialogue with some sort of agency. The champion team has agreed to step up and volunteer about 15 hours a week to do that work. And so property owners have the opportunity to engage in a dialogue with the champion team for that service.
Any questions?
I did have one back on the residential camping.
Mm-hmm.
No restrictions on the number of nights campers in someone's backyard?
No. So the Eugene, this is modeled after the Eugene program. The Eugene program doesn't have any restrictions on time frames. Just the only restriction is it's one family, and it can either be in the backyard or in the driveway. In the driveway, it's in a vehicle. In the backyard, it's in a tent or a camping shelter. There are other communities who have elected not to allow it to occur in residential areas.
I can see that becoming a nuisance potentially.
Mhm.
And especially if someone takes up permanent residence in the backyard, they're meeting all the criteria for sanitary and
Yeah, so there is that provision where the city manager can make a decision that it has become a nuisance, and there also is that provision of being able to create the administrative rules for the decision-making filters. We just felt embedding, since it's a pilot program and we're writing an ordinance to enable it, embedding some things that may need to be flexible as we figure out what works and what doesn't work into the ordinance. It made more sense to put that into this administrative rule piece.
Thank you.
Other questions? Go ahead.
So with regards to the champion and their role, it was noted that they offer site management facet. Is there any link with, so it's not intended for permanent housing? So services that they can call people to do something where they can be in stable housing? Or is that not beyond the purview of what we're looking at today?
So the city's not in the position to constitutionally prescribe that in the ordinance. However, we know from the discussion with Eugene that they have the 90-day rule. St. Vincent de Paul is the one who's actually enacted that rule. The city has not. That's the St. Vincent de Paul program. And there's been some dialogue about whether that makes sense in McMinnville or it needs to be longer because of access to shelter. We don't have as many provisions here. So the champion team is looking at all of that and talking about it.
So in a different place and see that kind of support if that's the one.
Mhm.
But there has to be a conversation about that.
Yep. Yep.
Add on, that's part of the services the champion team currently provides, so by adding, what they're really adding, what's being added on would be this service of site management, and then that would fold into the work that they're already doing, which is helping to identify people and get them into programs, which helps get them into more stable housing.
Not being identified as a champion
Already
for their business or for being have the services.
more or less,
They provide programs for people experiencing homelessness, and so they're familiar with the population group and
And just to add a little bit more, one of the components of the St. Vincent de Paul administered program is that participants in the program have to be in some form of case management. It doesn't necessarily have to be case management services that are provided by St. Vincent de Paul in Eugene. And the champion team could set up a program that's similar. For instance, somebody who was receiving case management services through the county or through YCAP could qualify for a candidate program that was administered by champion. So that's an example of that program evolved over time.
And the champion team would be just whatever, I remember they had the application service and the 90 days and the program around that, all of the champion.
so, and that's all St. Vincent de Paul down in Eugene, because the city's role is not providing the human services, right? It's really setting the policies to get up. And the champion team has gone down to Eugene to visit with the St. Vincent de Paul staff and review their program and what's working and getting recommendations from them. They're excited.
They really are excited about it, very much want to participate. Any other questions of the council?
So, will all people that could be partaking, will they all come to champion team, or that's up to the property owner if they want to come?
That's up to the property owner. It's the property owner's choice if they want to set up that relationship with the champion team or not. In Eugene, they have found most property owners do, because it's that extra measure of management.
So in Eugene, the property owner still has that, right, if they want to go to the, just off.
Yeah, and I think there's some that do.
Yeah, I don't know. So St. Vincent de Paul and the tiny properties and programs, they have their management, but they also, there's other camping that occurs in Eugene that's consistent with Eugene's code of daily wage and that sort of. So there are individual property owners who have chosen to manage their sites individually.
And that 15 hours a week, how many sites does champion team work?
So right now, with and they've been really thinking through, because they don't have funding for this service. Their dedicated funding is very targeted, but they really want to see it be successful and it serves their population group that they serve. So they've been thinking through it. That they think they can do up to 9 vehicles at this point in time with the 15 hours a week. So that could either be 3 properties at 3 vehicles each, or 9 properties with a singular vehicle at each property.
And adding on to that, that's fully volunteer hours, which, as Heather mentioned, is largely based on their funding method. And so in this initial phase, or as we've been moving through this, it would be reliant on the volunteer hours. However, our committee has been working on helping them find some alternative funding sources. And without being specific, because it's not completion yet, but we do believe that we've also found a way to get them additional regular funding that would then clients, they'd be able to service if they were able to have some paid staff on it as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yes, my last question would be is on that 3 vehicle limit. Is that 3 occupied vehicles, or does that count any ancillary vehicles they don't have with them as well? So if they had a motorhome, a van, a car, and a trailer, is that the over limit, or?
So that came up actually at the task force meeting. We didn't resolve that piece of the discussion, and that would probably be one of those administrative rules, things of figuring out what's working, what's not working.
Also, the property owner will have the discretion to say what is allowed or not allowed on their property. So while there'll be kind of a standard contract that Janky and team are working with, based on the Eugene model, if you say wanted to be a host site, that you wanted people that were, specifically, you specifically wanted to provide housing for people that were in recovery, or you specifically wanted families with children, or you specifically wanted, people that were just in cars, not in RVs. Whatever those specifics are, the property owner has the absolute discretion to build that into the contract, so nobody would be stuck saying, well, I thought I was going to be doing this, but now here I have these 10 vehicles, and that's not what I anticipated.
And a property owner it's written into the ordinance, can at any time immediately revoke participating in the program.
So for instance, if there's a small RV, a family living in it, and they tow a car, I think it would be reasonable to say somebody's also sleeping in the car, that would be nice to do. The car is just for transportation, if people are sleeping in the car, then it's just a vehicle that's parked on the property. So that's the kind of details you look at.
It just seemed to me that the intention originally behind the 3 cars was to capture the concept of a household. And I believe it was Jeff in the audience tonight that had been talking about car camping at his site, and it was mentioned that oftentimes you might have 3 or multiple cars to a single household. You want to keep those households together, you need to make some kind of accommodation. It sounds like we've gone through all of that.
Well, yeah, so, and that would be discussion for that. One of the things we heard from Eugene that they recommended in terms of don't do this and do that is keep the amount of persons who are car camping on a site to a lower number because of the interaction of different disparate people in desperate situations. So that's why the limitation.
Yeah, I don't think it had anything to do with limiting the household.
My point was that if you only allow, say, 1 car, you might have a household that has 2 or 3 cars, and so you've got to almost not allow them to have accommodation in one specific place. And so one of the things that I liked about the inclusion of the 3 cars is that it provides the ability for a household to stay together, and just that encourages your traffic out to be thinking about that limitation of cars in that context, because to me, that's really the important aspects to it.
I have a clarification. I thought that the vehicle, that they're not sleeping, because this is for 3 vehicles that have full sleeping.
It doesn't, so I was just looking at the specific language, and again, this hasn't been vetted through legal entirely. It is mimicking quite a bit of the Eugene language, though. It doesn't say that the vehicles on the site all have to be used for sleeping. There's nothing specific to that right now. So it would be a discussion we would need to explore.
The only other comment I think is that the Eugene ordinance has been in books for 30 years.
The car camping ordinance is probably only about a dozen years old.
So the next step, if you're comfortable, so all the language that's in the ordinance was in the PowerPoint on the different slides. If you're comfortable with it, the next step is we would bring it to you as an action item, as an ordinance, and I think our chair is ready to move it on July 10. Chair of the Affordable Housing Task Force.
That's okay. I bought some brochures. Probably would be handy. My name is Wayne Webke with the Amhalis West Sider Trail, with the Friends Group, because it's kind of a county trail, but the Friends Group are the partners with the community partners with the trail. And I want to thank you for inviting us over. I'm representing different people, but and I don't know. I'm here because it's kind of a follow-up to a letter that we sent to the council regarding an endorsement for the trail. And I guess I could start. Are you familiar with the trail? Pretty much, I mean, in terms of a little bit of the history and that, because we've been working on this group has been working on it since 2012. The effort actually started in 1991, and over some reasons, dealing with the railroad is not easy, and it didn't always work, so we kept coming back and being persistent. This one seems to be paying off, but what we're asking for is an endorsement that will be used both by the county and by the Friends Group in our efforts to procure grants. Since the trail was purchased in December of last year, the acquisition was completed as of December of last year. That opened up possibilities for the Friends Group for grant writing as well. And prior to that, the grants were all for acquisition, and a 501c3 just doesn't qualify for those types of grants. So now we're in a different position. So we'll be partnering with Yamhill County going forward. the effort right now is to get grant money to pay for a master plan or feasibility study, whichever way you want to call it, they're the same, but there's reasons for going with different terminology there, but that's the priority right now. And we won't even start construction with an exception because we do have a grant that allows us to engineer and build one major bridge between Carlton and Yamhill and engineer the other two. And that's the exception to no construction before we have an approved master plan. But the Carlton Yamhill is the first phase. We're going to be doing this in phases, and Carlton Yamhill will be the first phase. After that, it really depends on some things and a little bit on your city council as well. We'll probably be involved with it because the phase south of Carlton down, if you look on the map, it stops at Gun Club Corner, short of quite a bit short of McMinnville. So the ultimate goal is to have McMinnville on the south end anchoring and Forest Grove on the north end anchoring. So the phase between Carlton and Gun Club Corner, we won't even start that until there's some kind of a connection going in place or started between McMinnville McMinnville and Gun Club. So the first phase will be Yamhill Carlton, and after that it'll be kind of a consideration type of thing. But the trail, as far as the benefit to McMinnville, McMinnville has gotten to be a very, very important destination for tourists, for people in the not just out of state but in state, and trails are renowned for attracting tourists. Lodging is one of the primary things that is important to a trail with out-of-town people. Your bed and breakfast, your hotels, we have two nice downtown hotels now, and having an amenity like a recreational trail to attract even more people. Part of having the trail is getting people off the trail, not just to come in and have coffee, but to stay one or two nights. That's where the most tourist dollars are, is when a town city starts using a trail to promote tourism in that way. And Carlton, Yamhill, Gaston are gearing up for that. It's really going to benefit the smaller towns, but it's going to be a good benefit, not just for tourists coming in, but for people in McMinnville having that connection. The north end of the trail, if you look on the map there's Wapto Lake Refuge. That is U.S. Fish and Wildlife Refuge, and it's being planned as a nature type of thing with trails throughout. We may even have to use one of the dikes in order to cross onto that trail. The purchase that Yamhill County made stops just about at the tip of that. There's a little over 17 miles total with the trail. Yamhill County was able to purchase just a little over 12 of that. So it stops south of Gaston. Gaston is in the process of trying to purchase the part that's in their city. Washington County, the Yamhill County's Washington County boundary is right there as well. Washington County is involved in trying to secure that as well. So Union Pacific owned it. That's who we've been negotiating with. There's still negotiations going on. It's like dealing with a little country of sorts. 6 years of negotiations, and it finally happened in December. But we'd really welcome your endorsement. It would go a long way toward the grant writing that we do. and making it, coming to a completion on it as much as we can, so. Any questions?
Thank you, Wayne. I guess, the council kind of delivered on this a little bit, just see how you feel when they will then tell the meeting.
I like the idea. I received the letter from Friends of the Amos Trail. I note that the trail has a regional economic benefit, that our city's strategic plan calls for increased recreational activies, and particularly increased recreational activities outside of the city. This is one of the things that we can do as a local jurisdiction to encourage those things to happen outside of our borders. And it reminds me also that earlier this year we signed on to a letter supporting the next phase of the Newburgh-Dundee bypass, which won't connect to McMinnville for quite some time either, and yet also has a kind of similar regional economic impact. So I'd like to see us support the trail.
Thank you, Sal. Adam, thoughts?
I mean, as far as recreation goes, I definitely think it's needed around here. I think there's concerns from farmers that should possibly still be addressed to some extent. But in general, I think rail trail projects are great for families and great for communities, and overall they're a positive experience. I just think that, there is concerns that should be addressed for farmers.
The master plan I mentioned, in the county's amendment to their transportation system plan, they addressed, because there's been, back in this room right here, three public meetings with the room full, and all of the concerns that the farmers were included, well, as far as right down to different people's acreage, included in the amendment to the system plan. And the master plan will be where a company will be hired, an engineering company will be hired to do this master plan, and that's what they do, is master plans for trails and other kinds of these transportation things. But they will be going door to door with each, not just the farmers, but anybody that is along the trail. That sort of mitigation for the concerns that really take place. So that's built into the whole thing. Right from the beginning, it was agreed upon that all those concerns, that we understood that the change brings about concerns, and those things have to be addressed. If it's building a fence, if it's putting arborvitae in front of the fence, if it's gates, whatever is considered, that's going to be part of the plan.
Okay, and other than that, Ken Wright presented this to me about 10 years ago, and it's came a long way, so congratulations on the headway you have made in the last 8 to 10 years since he presented it to Kiwanis.
Alan, any questions, any comments?
I do, Jared Lucky. So Yakima County is held, is that, so the Board of Commissioners actually got on board with this, and then it was split for
I'm sorry, a little hard of hearing, so the Board of Commissioners, what?
the Board of Commissioners, Yakima County Board of Commissioners, they came on board with supporting this?
Yes, it was not an immediate support that came back with reconsideration, but it was kind of 2 to 1, I think.
Yeah, I like the idea. It's a great idea. Follow up with South Toronto. We've taken a stance on things out of our jurisdiction, such as the expansion of the landfill outside of town. So we could, there is a precedent for it, us supporting something outside our jurisdiction. I like that. I'd like to see some more discussion on it.
Remy?
I'm like-minded with the thoughts we've heard so far.
Okay, Wendy?
I wanted to congratulate you also. I know how long of a process this has been, and I know how hard fought just getting where you've gotten is. I had a couple of questions. So just to clarify that when Gaston and Washington County are successful, then the whole area will have been purchased. The whole area that the trail would go on will be owned by someone other than the railroad to be able to develop. Is that correct? Or no? Maybe, okay.
Maybe, because there is about a little over a mile south of Gaston that's not purchased yet, and there's a little sliver or triangle just south of Gaston that's privately owned. And it's set right on Highway 47. This parallels Highway 47, pretty much the whole 17 miles. But it sets right on Highway 47 and juts out into the game refuge. So there's some options there. You can go like the banks for Coney did. They had where they couldn't get some privately owned. They went on the state highway right away. That's one option. The other is with the game refuge. There are dikes right behind that piece of property, so it might be, the people that get fishing game, they try to shut their dam, and they're looking at, this is one of their only accesses to that refuge, and they want to get people out there. So it's kind of a win-win for us, win for them, being neighbors like that, so there's the possibility of building houses we can work around. If that purchase can be made, when you're buying from a railroad, the right of way is 60 foot for the most part. That's where the trains run, 60 foot, but you have industrial or sidings that can be 120 foot or more. In Danville, there's industrial, but back when there was a sawmill on it, so it's even wider than 120. And then when we got the industrial that gets a little bit more expensive, and they negotiate a little bit differently for us, so it takes a bit longer.
Gotcha. Okay.
Washington County is involved in the meetings with them, our meetings.
Great. Well, I think it's really, really good. We talked, and one of the ideas that came up during our strategic planning was, and in our tourism, was to look at different types of tourism, and one was bicycle travel. And I think that would be a big boon for that, to have a trail like this. So I do think it does, even though it's outside of our jurisdiction, technically I think it really does support some of the things, some of our goals as a city. And so I'm definitely in support of it.
The big thing for you would be getting a connection between the south end and into town. And there's a couple, there's some options there. They're a little bit limited. There's a farmer that has property on part of that road that goes down to Panther Creek, and he's offered to give a corridor down to Panther Creek, which we get into. There's two pieces of property down there that are now privately owned, but one of them will be ceded to Danville County Soil and Water Conservation at some point for a nature park. So that's an option down the road. There's also people that suggested trail with rail, because that section south of the road is, except for about 600 foot of it, is still railroad. The local, well, it's not local anymore, but
Wayne?
leases that.
Wayne? Thank you. We appreciate your information. We need to wrap things up here to get on with our regular meeting, but I appreciate all the information you come with. I did want to say that I am favorable to this also, so But I believe Jeff might have a few comments.
So one of the things we can do is we can come up with a draft letter that acknowledges how we think this project supports some of the work that we have done as an organization. We can acknowledge that we're not in a decision-making role and that there's a lot of details that have yet to be worked out. We'll come up with a draft letter for the mayor's signature and perhaps the council's endorsement, and we'll run that past you.
All right, thank you. Thank you for coming, Wayne. I appreciate it. We all do. With that, we're going to recess for about 5 minutes and then start up again. We will start at 5 after 7.
That's his answer. Right. I don't know.
I walked right in front of your camera. No, before, when there was something going on. Heather, that's your high card, Mike.
She's doing ballet. It's cute. Wait till she gets
Good evening, everyone. We're here for the June 26th City Council meeting. We're starting about 7 minutes after the hour. Let's see. And I guess we are now going to have the Pledge of Allegiance. Let's all stand. I'll give it. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. This is the time we have for comments from citizens. Anyone that is interested, an audience member, is invited to provide comments. Anyone may speak on any topic other than a topic already on the agenda, a matter in litigation, a quasi-judicial land use matter, or a matter scheduled for a public hearing at some future date. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person, up to 30 minutes. We do have a person interested in speaking to us tonight, Tara Gregory, and it's about the ordinance that'll be presented quite a bit later this evening. So if you would like to speak now, you may come up forward. Yes.
Good evening. My name is Tara Gregory. I'm a medical professional in the area. I'm on the medical staff at Providence St. Vincent Hospital and Medical Center, as well as Oregon Health and Science University. However, tonight, I'm not going to offer you my own professional opinion, but yet offer a brief, within the 3-minute window, review of the pertinent medical evidence and recommendations. This is regarding Ordinance 5054 which will show strong support for a hopeful endorsement by the council due to the dangers of secondhand smoke. I provided the committee members with a handout that looks like this. I will be referring to that briefly in a moment. First, from the American Cancer Society, and I will provide all of this written material to you afterwards, secondhand smoke, a definition. There are two types of secondhand smoke: mainstream smoke, the smoke that is exhaled by someone that is smoking; side stream smoke, smoke from the lighted end of a cigarette, pipe, cigar, tobacco, or any other type of pipe or smoking device, including electronic cigarettes. The particles that come out of that side stream smoke are much smaller than the standard smoke particles. These smaller particles can make their way into the lungs and into the body much easier than standard smoke. When non-smokers are exposed to secondhand smoke, it's called involuntary smoking. Non-smokers who breathe in secondhand smoke take in nicotine and toxic chemicals in the same way that smokers do. The more secondhand smoke you breathe, the higher the levels of these chemicals in your body. And this is again by the American Cancer Society. There is no safe level of exposure to secondhand smoke. Secondhand smoke is known to cause cancer. It has more than 7,000 toxic chemicals, including at least 70 that have been proven to cause cancer. Secondhand smoke causes lung cancer, even in people who have never smoked at all. There's also evidence suggesting it might be linked in adults to cancers of the larynx, that's the voice box, pharynx, throat and neck, nasal sinuses, brain, bladder, stomach, breast. Now, what about children? The American Cancer Society has linked in children, secondhand smoke has caused lymphoma, leukemia, liver cancer, and brain tumors. Young children that are affected by secondhand smoke get sick more often, have more lung infections, bronchitis, pneumonia, and I found this interesting. They get more ear infections, but very interesting. It can also trigger asthma attacks, even in children that have never had asthma at all. So I think that's interesting. Now, the handout looks like this. Again, this is by the CDC, or Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta. Some of the chemicals that are found in secondhand smoke: formaldehyde, benzene, radioactive polonium-210, vinyl chloride, carbon monoxide, hydrogen cyanide, butane, ammonia that you might find in a household cleaner, toluene, found in paint thinner, cadmium, lead, arsenic, chromium, to name a few. Now, more from the Centers for Disease Control. Again, they affirm, as did the American Cancer Society, that there is no risk-free level of secondhand smoke exposure. Even brief exposure, such as walking past someone on 3rd Street that might be smoking, even brief exposure can be harmful to your health. Since 1964, 2,500,000 non-smokers have died from health problems caused by exposure to secondhand smoke. Also, heart disease, lung cancer, stroke. For non-smokers, breathing secondhand smoke has immediate harmful effects on the heart and blood vessels. Again, that's the CDC. I will move on. The World Health Organization. The chemicals in secondhand smoke poison the heart muscle and interfere with the ability of blood vessels to adjust themselves to control blood pressure and blood flow. Increase the buildup. Is that time? All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate your attention, and I do hope and urge a pro vote on 5054. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else who would like to give public comments tonight? Again, yes. You have to fill that form?
I do, yeah.
Okay, you want to bring it to me?
Thank you. Olivera. Yeah. Thank you so much. I just came on behalf of one of the businesses. I got an email from the McMinnville Downtown Association, and And this is about the secondhand smoke as well, or the smoking on 3rd Street. And we've been affected greatly because of the constant smoking, and we even put up 10-foot signs and nobody follows them. I've called the police multiple times to come and walk past to move them out. We are unable to have customers sit outside on 3rd Street and enjoy their wine tastings or their wine. We're unable to open the doors during live music or on a cool breeze evening like tonight because of the constant smoke coming in from the Blue Moon. I've talked with the owners of Blue Moon and asked them to move the smokers to the back or move the smokestack up the street, and that's just not happening. So I'm very pro vote of the non-smoking on 3rd Street. I've talked to many customers about it, and we have a lot of locals who come in nightly, and they'd be very, very happy to see that happen on 3rd Street in its entirety. So anyway, just from a business perspective, it's been very difficult to have a pleasant business. Nobody wants to come to a really nice wine bar and walk through a cloud of smoke as they walk in. So anyway, that's my comments, and thank you for listening.
Did you mention the business that you represent?
Willamette Valley Vineyards on 3rd Street, 3rd and Cowles. Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
You said you asked the after smokestack to be moved to the back, but it hasn't happened. Can you,
There's a place to drop the cigarette butts, so they all stand around out there all day from 7 a.m. until the time we close. So I just kindly asked the owners, and I did hear there are new owners at the Blue Moon, but I kindly asked the old owners if they would be able to move that to the back parking lot, and they said that due to the cars back there, they weren't able to. So that was the answer I got. So anyhow.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on it tonight? One more time. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on it tonight? Okay. All right. So we are going to have a proposed hearing, or a public hearing tonight on the proposed supplemental budget for the fiscal year, June 30th, 2018, related to the telecommunications fund. And Marcia, would you like to lead this conversation, please?
Yes, thank you, councilors. Later on the agenda this evening, there is a resolution adopting the supplemental budget for the telecommunications fund for 2017-18, the current fiscal year. The supplemental budget is necessary because we received more cable franchise fee and tech revenue than we anticipated. The supplemental budget increases the appropriations in the telecommunications fund and allows us to disperse that additional revenue to McMinnville community media. Total budget law does allow us to make this change, however, the increase in appropriations of $12,000 exceeds 10% of the expenditures in the fund, and therefore the city is required to hold a budget hearing to take public comment on the proposed supplemental budget.
Okay, so we will open this public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to give testimony in regard to the supplemental budget for the fiscal year, June 30th, 2018? And once again, I ask, is there anyone present who would like to give testimony on the supplemental budget for the telecommunications fund for June 30th, 2018? Hearing nothing, I am going to close the hearing. Okay, then we have a second public hearing on the proposed increase in the transportation fund expenditures in the year 2018-19 budget to be adopted by the City Council. Marcia?
Thank you. As you mentioned, this public hearing is related to the adoption of the budget for fiscal year 2018-19. Again, local budget law allows the governing body to make changes to the budget that was approved by the budget committee. In this case, on May 16th, the budget committee approved the budget. However, if a change in the appropriations in any fund exceeds 10% of the fund's total expenditures, a budget hearing is required to be held, and the financial summary is revised and published. So the purpose of this budget hearing is to take public comment on the proposed increase in the 2018-19 budget for the transportation fund. This increase is necessary because some of the projects that were scheduled and budgeted for 2017-18 are carried over to 2018-19. And this is typical. This will happen quite often at the end of the year for these major capital projects. The total increase in the transportation fund expenditures is $1,352,100. I also wanted to mention that the revised financial summary was republished in the Register as required by the budget law.
Okay, thank you, Marcia. So we are now going to open the public hearing regarding the proposed increase in the transportation fund expenditures for the year 2018-19 budget to be adopted by the City Council. Okay, would anyone like to give testimony on this particular subject? Would anyone present, again, like to give any testimony on this particular subject? Hearing none, I'm going to close the hearing. All right, thank you, Marcia. We are now going to have a presentation from Gary Eastland to receive his report and recommendation from on the 2018-2019 property liability, workman's compensation, and auto insurance coverages. Welcome, Gary.
Thank you. I understand we don't have a microphone, is that right?
Afraid so, but they'll move the mic over closer to you, so just try it.
My voice is kind of weak, so I'll try to get my message across. Basically, I want to thank everybody once again, as I did in my letter. You've supported me and Hagen Hamilton for many years, and we really try to take pride in our relationship here. It's been a pleasure getting to know Jeff and working with David the last couple of years. So I think we have a good relationship. Marcia and her crew has just done a tremendous job of putting all the updates, which is a huge job every year. It's almost like reinventing the wheel because we've had some turnovers there, and she's done a great job of supporting us. And Dewey did a really good job this year of putting everything into the computer. That said, we have some pretty significant increases this year, so I want to kind of go into those a little bit and explain some of the reasons for those increases. But to start with, we have two separate line items. The first one is the package, which is the city-county renewal for property casualty, which is all the buildings, the liability, the vehicles, the police department, the fire department, and all their operations. That actually had a slight increase. It was about a 4.5% increase to $475,808 as compared to $454,655 last year. Now that's within pretty much slightly under the average increase that most of the members. The average increase was 5%. So we feel pretty good about that. It also increased all the property values 2%. We increased some of the personnel services and some of the other line items that they use for their liability went up slightly, or actually, I don't know what the percentage was, but it did go up somewhat. So we didn't really see much of a rate increase. It was primarily exposure driven. So I feel pretty comfortable with that. The other thing I want to say about that is when we compare this with other states, and I've talked about this in the past, this risk retention group, CIS, has been very successful. And there's reasons for it, because every insurance company in the United States wants to do business in Oregon, because we don't have a super high litigious outlook on things, even though it's not necessarily improving, but it's better than our neighbors. And we also don't get hailstorms, at least not on this side of the Cascades. We don't get too many hurricanes. We get some windstorms once in a while. But in general, it's a really good place for insurance companies to do business. So that translates very well to this self-insurance group, which is what you are a member of. And so over the last 25 years, it's been a very, very good arrangement, and it's been successful. We had to take one member out of the group last year and replace it because of their significant losses. And it took 6 policies to replace this one policy that we have. And the cost went up over, it was about almost 200%. And so the cost, and that's what other states around us are faced with on a regular basis. So CIS is doing a good job. It's a big expense item, but it could be significantly higher in other jurisdictions. So that's just throwing that out as support for that program. The work comp is also managed by CIS, and this is where we saw the significant increase. And I kind of want to touch on this because what we're looking at here is an increase in your deposit premium. It's just the down payment. The down payment went up from $92,584 last year to $181,846. Now that sounds like a pretty amazing jump, but it's actually the rates have not gone up. The payrolls have gone up slightly, but really what they're looking at is just an increased deposit. And what this is a retro plan. So you pay a percentage of the estimated annual premium, which was at just slightly over $500,000. Last year, up until this year, you paid 25% of that, and that was increased, and then you paid 10% at the end of 5 years when you closed out the retro plan. So it worked out to be a 35% charge that's built in. You're going to pay a minimum of 35% of the annual premium. And then the losses, as they're paid out, you pay them back. So for example, in the last 7-8 years, you've been paying in the range of $300,000 up. One year, I think we actually exceeded the estimated, which would have been closer to the $500,000. But on average, your rates are always going to be higher than the 181, is what I'm trying to say. We have never had a year below that. And so you don't kick in any more on that until the losses exceed that amount, which they have, but it will ultimately normally get to that point. So it's not like it's an automatic increase. So the budget line has to be based on the estimated costs, which are actually spread out over a 5-year period. So Marcia has to do magic in trying to figure out what that's going to be. And they've got a pretty good formula for that. And it's been very successful. Because over the past 15 years, we have always come in under what you would have paid if you would have just paid the guaranteed cost up front. Okay, and I have a lot of documentation to support that, but it's just kind of hard to explain a significant down payment increase like this without going into a little bit of detail. But the other thing that really hit us this year is the mod, your experience mod, which is based on your actual experience, is, and just to oversimplify it, and it's based on a percentage of the losses that are paid out as opposed to what you've paid in premium. You had a 0.76 mod last year. We had a really good year drop out. It's a 5-year term that they use. And so 5 years ago, you had a really good year with hardly any losses. It dropped out. Last year, not so good. It dropped in. And so that created this 20% increase on your mod. Which is actually, that's what's impacted the premium as well. So Jeff pointed out that actually we went from a super great mod to an okay mod. It's still not terrible. It's under 1. That means you're doing quite well. But we've always been somewhat better than that. And I expect that it will go down again because the management of the claims, a lot of stuff that goes on in fire department and police department is dangerous, and sometimes things happen, and that's what really drives the premium. It doesn't take one back injury can cost $400,000 or $500,000, and so considering the number of employees, they've done quite well. But it's just kind of caught up with us this year. But is there any questions on that? Because I know that is a fairly significant change in your deposit premium.
So before questions, let me add one more thing. These costs and our loss, as we pay losses over the course of the year, are paid from our insurance reserve fund, which are collected from our operational funds over time. And bank, we're currently carrying out a $1.8 million reserve in that insurance reserve fund. So even though this is a significant impact on our deposit, we still have substantial reserves available to pay these funds. Did I get that right, Marcia?
Right on.
Yeah.
So even though our bond went up significantly, you don't expect for us to have to pay more
I expect it probably will be impacted more by the mod than anything. So put it this way, if you had the same amount of losses with a higher mod, it's going to be 20% more. So that's kind of what it boils down to. So if you're going to do a strict budget, I would say the cost this year would probably run 21% higher than it would in prior years with the expected losses. But, yeah. The airport liability is a separate policy because that's excluded under the general liability or the public entity liability in the CIS program. So we carry a separate policy which covers bodily injury and property damage as related to airport operations, and that didn't go up. It's been the same premium for the last 4 years, and it's $5,675. So that's the bulk of the costs. Is there any coverage questions?
I guess just on the mod factor, the 5 years we're currently in, or do we have good years still in there, or are we bad year?
We've had a couple of significantly bad years. We have one more that's probably as bad as the one that just dropped in. And see, they don't use the most recent year. Now, this year hasn't been too bad. We haven't seen a lot of activity this year. So I think this is our best year of the last, and that will go in next year. So that helps a lot. So that'll slide in if we can kind of keep things trending in that direction. And then the other year that'll drop off next year was it was a neutral, about in the middle, so it won't impact it too much either way. But I expect it'll start to go back down. We'll probably see some, hopefully, if a good year, if we continue to have the year we had, which, see, the reason that you don't know what's developed after the first year, they don't use that one because a lot of work comp claims don't show up until after the first year, and then they develop over the 5-6 year period. And so that's how that's kind of drug out for 5 years. So the good news is, at the end of this particular policy term for the 18-19 year, when we do close it out down the road, we won't have to pay that 10% at the end. Because that was oftentimes fairly, those would come at kind of unexpected times. We always received options to close them out early, and now we won't ever have any reason probably to close them out early. So I think it's probably going to be good, but it'll take a year or two to kind of smooth out. Yes, that's true. And actually, I think the one thing I really wanted to stress is we're paying more down payment. We're not paying more and as much more as it seems like we are in this particular light. But yes, it reflects a positive economy, good growth, increase in a number of different areas. So. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Alan. We're hanging in there. Thank you very much. Did Scott get the night off? Okay, you did. That's good. Thanks very much.
Structure tonight. All right, so we're now moving into the consent agenda, and there are a number of items on the consent agenda. One is Resolution 2018-32, a resolution declaring the city's election to receive state revenues. Resolution number 2018-33, a resolution certifying provision of municipal services for the city of McMinnville as required by ORS 221.760. 2018-33, a resolution extending the City of McMinnville's workers' compensation coverage to the City of McMinnville's volunteers. And resolution number 2017-35, a resolution providing for and approving a form of contract by and between the City of McMinnville, Oregon, and the McMinnville Rural Fire Protection District. Would any counselor request to have an item removed from the consent agenda and heard in its regular place on the agenda? Okay, hearing nothing, I ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Motion from Alan.
Second.
And a second from Adam. Okay. All those in favor please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please indicate by saying nay. We have the consent agenda passed unanimously in favor. Okay. Do I need to say something? No. Okay. All right. All right, Marcia, once again, we are going to call on you. Let's see, this is resolution number 2018-36, a resolution adopting a supplemental budget for the fiscal year 2017-18 and making supplemental appropriations related to the telecommunications fund. So, Marcia?
Thank you.
Take it away.
This resolution proposes a supplemental budget for the telecommunications fund. And as we mentioned in the budget hearing earlier this evening, the supplemental budget is necessary to allow us to disperse the higher amount of franchise fee and PEG revenue that we received this year to McMinnville Community Media. The resolution increases the appropriations in this fund by $12,000. And staff recommends adoption of this resolution.
Council discussion. Is there any discussion, or do you have any questions for Marcia in regard to this? Hearing none, may I ask for a motion, please?
So moved.
Wendy moves.
Second.
Remy seconds. All those in favor, please respond by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed, please respond by nay, saying nay. The motion passes unanimously. Okay. All right, resolution number 2018-37, a resolution making a budgetary transfer of appropriation authority for the fiscal year 2018 or 2017-2018. General Fund, Finance, and Library Department budget. Marcia, would you please present?
Yes. This resolution transfers appropriations. It does have appropriations for 17-18. It's related to a decision that was made in April this year that we would fund all general services employees VIVA accounts, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with the VIVA account. It's a voluntary employees beneficiary association plan, and basically it's an account that the city contributes money to for each employee, that then the employee can use that money to pay for out-of-pocket medical expenses. So again, the decision was made that the general services employees, or the non-represented employees, that the contribution into those accounts would be increased. Prior to that, the accounts had been funded at 50% of the deductible. So if my deductible was $1,000, the city contributed $500 to my VIVA account. So the decision here was made to fund my account at $1,000 at 100% instead of 50%. And what that did was achieve equity with the represented employees in the fire union who have previously had their accounts funded at that 100%. So now the non-represented general services and the fire union members, their VIVA, the contribution is the same. However, when we adopted the budget a year ago, we did not anticipate that we would be making that increase. So there were a couple of departments, mine was one and library was the other, where it would be possible that we would be over budget. And I really don't anticipate that either of these departments will be over budget. However, I was thinking about the fact that at the library they're doing this major project with the elevator, and if something unanticipated came up, I wanted to make sure there's enough appropriation to cover any unanticipated expense that might come about with that remodel. And with the finance department, I just have a very small budget and don't have a lot of cushion to absorb extra expenses. So again, we're not increasing appropriations, we're transferring appropriation. In this case, from the fire department. You may recall that we actually did a supplemental budget back in May for the fire department, and that was relating to the wildfire conflagrations that the department had responded to. And in that supplemental budget, we increased appropriations to cover additional costs that were incurred. Actually, that the entire amount of that increase was needed to cover the costs that were incurred relating to the equipment. So because of that additional appropriation that wasn't needed in the fire department, we're just transferring that appropriation authority from the fire department to library and finance at the chief's generosity here to share some of his budget authority with us. Again, I don't really expect that this will be needed. However, this is our last chance to make any budget adjustments for 2017. And that is the purpose of this resolution.
This is the right resolution. No, it's this one here. Okay. All right, council discussion. Do any councilors have questions of Marcia or comments or anything? Here, Wendy?
Marcia, so I'm assuming that this is the case, but in this coming budget, we have all of that accounted for. Then it was just that this past year we hadn't at budget time.
That is correct.
And so let me, we're on a calendar year basis for our insurance policies. Our insurance policies run starting January 1. That's also when employees start incurring deductibles and out-of-pocket costs. And so the VIBA is traditionally funded on January 1 as well. And so because it's a middle of the fiscal year action is why we ended up with the mid-year adjustment.
So the decision was made when that
Right.
insurance changed over to the new year.
Right.
So we knew about it then.
Right.
Because we'd already made the decision. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
Sharing tonight. We're sharing.
One city.
Sharing, transferring over here. It's a unity. Nice.
I'm asking for a motion to approve resolution number 2018-37. May I have a motion from anyone?
So moved.
Remy makes the motion.
Second.
And Wendy seconds it. All of those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those who oppose, please indicate by saying nay. Okay, the motion passes unanimously. I guess I'm supposed to. Okay, we move on to resolution number 2018-37, a resolution making a budgetary transfer of appropriation authority for the fiscal year 2017-18.
Next one, actually.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm down one. Okay.
C.
C? Well, that's what I'm reading.
Yep, she's here.
Sorry.
Okay. Okay, I'm confused
You
now.
said 2018-37.
Oh,
It's 2018-38.
I'm sorry, I must have misread it then. At any rate, it's 2018-38, and for the fiscal year 2017-18 for the ambulance fund. Marcia, please report.
Yes, this resolution amends the budget for the ambulance fund for the current fiscal year, 2017-18. Here again, we are not increasing the appropriation, we are transferring appropriation from the contingency category in the ambulance fund to other categories in the ambulance fund. So a couple of things that happened this year that were unanticipated. One is that we had some firefighter vacancies and some leave that increased our overtime costs. costs because of the shift coverage that was required. And so the resolution transfers $20,000 from that contingency to overtime in personal services here again. We are just processing the last payroll in the year, so we may not need $20,000, but there's a little bit extra cushion here, just in case there's some additional overtime that we didn't anticipate. The other part of this transfer, the $75,000 from contingency to materials and services, is related to ambulance billing write-offs. So as we had a shortage in staff in the ambulance billing department, we continued to bill. However, we were not as current as we usually are, which caused the receivable to increase. As we are working our way through and bringing that receivable down, we are now reporting those write-offs. I wanted to point out too that this is not a change in the net revenue for the ambulance fund. Write-offs last year were much lower than usual, and this year they're higher than usual because of the timing difference. So overall, there really isn't a change in the net revenue in the ambulance fund. It's just these write-offs that were really pushed through into this current fiscal year. And I hope that makes sense. So staff would recommend that we adopt budget or resolution 2018-38.
Okay. Is there any council discussion? Any questions for Marcia? Hearing none, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve Resolution 2018-38.
So moved.
Adam moves.
Second.
And Wendy seconds. All those in favor of this motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, please indicate by saying nay. I believe it passed unanimously. Okay, resolution number 2018-39, a resolution adopting a new fee schedule for ambulance services provided by the City of McMinnville, repealing resolution number 2017-45. And Chief Leipert, would you like to tell us about this?
Yeah, this is the 3.6 was the cost of living increase this year. So we're applying the cost of living increase to the raise to try and offset some of the non-allowance by the Medicare and Medicaid processes and systems that work within our system. We're still relatively high within the state, but we're below 3 or 4 major fire ambulance providers within the state, so we're not the highest in the state at these rates. We're very close to Eugene, Springfield, Bend, as well as numerous prices for some of the functions transferred into Joel.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Council, any questions of the Chief? Any questions? Okay, hearing none, I need a motion to approve resolution number 2018-39.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, having the motion made by Wendy and the second by Alan. All those in favor of this motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, please indicate by saying nay. I believe it passes unanimously in favor. Okay. Resolution number 2018-40, a resolution adopting the budget for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2018, making the appropriations, imposing the property taxes, and categorizing the property taxes. Marcia.
Thank you. As you mentioned, this resolution is required by local budget law in order to have appropriations for 2018-19. I wanted to point out that local budget law, as I mentioned before, does allow the governing body to make changes from the budget that was approved by the budget committee. We previously reviewed the changes that were made to the transportation fund relating to projects that were carried over. Again, that public hearing was required because the increase in the 18-19 budget because of those carried over projects was more than 10% in that fund. We did, however, make a couple other changes to the budget that was approved by the budget committee. Another one relating to projects being carried over from 17-18 into 18-19 was in the wastewater capital fund, and that increase was a total of $480,000 for a variety of projects that were related to the ion reduction and some capital projects that were at the wastewater plant. There were also two increases that were related to personal services. The first one was in the General Fund Park and Recreation Department budget for 18-19, and that increase was a little over $3,000, and that was related to a decision that was made sort of late in the game to reclassify a position because that position had taken on additional responsibilities, so it was appropriate to reclassify the position. However, it did increase personal services in the Park and Recreation Aquatic Center budget by a little over $3,000. And then in the General Fund Library Department, the 2018-19 budget includes an increase of about $50,000, and that is due to increasing the hours that the library is open from 45 hours a week to 50 hours a week. And I would be happy to answer any questions relating to this resolution adopting the budget.
Councilors, do you have any questions for Marcia? Hearing none, I'm going to ask for a motion to adopt the fiscal year 2018-19 budget. Make appropriations and impose and categorize property tax. Alan moves. Do I have a second?
Second.
Wendy seconds. And, okay. Councilor Alan Rudin moves and Councilor Wendy Stassen seconds to adopt Resolution 2018-40, adopting the 2018-2019 budget for the total amount of $111,996,208 for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2018, to make the appropriations in the amount of $77,368,779, to impose and categorize the City of McMinnville's permanent property tax rate of 5.02 dollars and per thousand assessed value for the general operations, and $3,980,326 for debt service. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. All those opposed, please indicate by saying nay. We have unanimous ayes. So it passes. Resolution number 2018-41, resolution amending the city manager's employment agreement. Mr. Towery, will you please present?
Thank you, Council President Menke, members of the council. During the March 27th regular council meeting, the council met in an open session to conduct a one-year review of my performance. At the close of that meeting, there were a number of prospective amendments to the city manager's employment contract that were identified for follow-up. There are four changes identified. One is a clarification of reporting relationships that's consistent with the FY 18-19 budget that you just adopted. One is an increase in vacation accrual that better reflects my career experience. One is a minor change to mileage reimbursement, and one is an increase in deferred compensation to better reflect the average benefit packages of comparable cities. We've included an amended contract that's shown in a legislative version that has more detailed comments related to each aspect of the proposed change, as well as a clean version for your consideration. If the council agrees that this proposed agreement reflects the will of the council, a motion to authorize the mayor to sign the agreement by approving the resolution is in order. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Does the council have any questions? If you can look at this, there was an amended email sent out with this particular information.
What's the difference in the cost, the employment cost to the city for the shifting from the up to 8% matching funds on the retirement to switching that to just an 8% straight out?
So it's, right now, the agreement matches up to 5%. The recommendation from Sean O'Day from the COG is to just do a straight 8%. There's an IRS limit to the amount that can be deferred without a tax impact. If it was a matching 8 to 8, that would put me in a tax liability situation. So his recommendation is to simply do an 8% contribution. The net impact would be about $4,800 over the course of the fiscal year.
For that one?
For that deferred comp, yes.
And then it's basically another week of vacation?
Right.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Just one other question. How does the retirement compare to the other management level retirement benefits?
So we compared to comparable cities for the city manager's position. Is that what you mean?
Well, I meant within our organization.
The city doesn't make matching contributions to deferred compensation for any employees other than myself. I'm the only at-will employee with a contract or with an employment agreement.
Okay.
Mileage going from 75 to 50, is that round trip or is that like?
It's one way, yeah.
Okay.
So the 50 miles means if I'm going to Salem or Portland, there's no mileage reimbursement. If I'm going further than that, then there is.
Any other further discussion? I would ask for a motion to approve Resolution 2018-41.
Second.
Alan moved and Wendy seconded. Or I'm sorry, Remy seconded. I apologize, Remy. Okay. All those who are in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please indicate by saying nay. And the motion for resolution number 2018-41 passes unanimously. And we are now to the second reading of ordinance number 54. And I believe we have some people here tonight who would like to speak in regard to this. I'm looking for my list here.
We have that.
We have Scylla. Would you like to come forward and give your testimony? Now, Scylla served on the Public Safety Committee.
Yes. Hi, I'm Scylla McClellan. I think I know most of you. I'm the owner of Third Street Books, and I'm also representing the McMinnville Downtown Association. I was, as Councilor Menke mentioned, on the Downtown Safety Task Force, which met over the course of 9 months or so. And part of the outcome of that committee was a recommendation that I think you're all aware of, to create a smoke-free ordinance for downtown McMinnville, 3rd Street area, and then we made that suggestion. The actual ordinance was created, etc. You have all read it. And I'm here just supporting that, and I'm able to answer any questions for anybody regarding the dissemination of that information to the McMinnville Downtown Association members. We are in the process of, and I think you've all received this also, that was sent out by Brad James, our downtown manager, or excuse me, executive director, regarding the sort of timeline, loose timeline for this. And with the hope that it will pass, our plan is actually, there's a group of us that will be heading out tomorrow morning to address the new ordinance, or rather inform merchants on 3rd Street exactly of the details of it for anybody that hasn't been priorly made aware of it. And I support it that should be obvious, but I don't think I actually said those words. So, yeah, if there are no questions. Yes.
So I went and started talking to some of the businesses that were located in between Third and Second and, Third and Fourth. Sorry. But the people that I talked to, and I didn't get to everyone, I wanted to talk to all those people, the people that basically these businesses would be also affected, but in the reverse direction, where the smoking would then theoretically move in front of their businesses, right? So
Right.
Studio 221, Bizzle, Victory Flats, Atticus, Cupcake Couture. So I didn't get everybody, but the people that I did get to said they had received communication from MDA. I definitely heard some frustration from more than one of those business owners. And I'm concerned that it was just going to push smoking now in front of their businesses. And then the restaurants also reflected a concern about, all the employees at Nick's, McMinnville, Oramba, Jam, many of them are smokers, and so they don't have necessarily the luxury of time during the shift to go further and further away. And then I also heard frustration from people that I spoke to that currently, like, for instance, the Blue Moon came up earlier, and we all know that, there are people smoking right there all day,
Right.
every day. And the current ban on smoking, the 10-foot, 10-foot from the door, that's not being enforced, and then how it is, that's not currently being enforced, where we know there's basically somebody parked there smoking any time of the day. I heard some concerns about that, well, is anything going to happen? So it's kind of I heard two different things. One, I don't think this is really going to do anything. And two, was the concern that that you're kind of creating this insulation around the businesses that are just on Third Street, that are not really around all of the downtown businesses. There was one other, yeah.
Can we close out for just a minute or two? We could talk about this a little more in deliberation, okay?
Well, my question was. Okay. Remember all of that, so I'm going to come back and bring it into a question.
Well, I'm not sure, is this appropriate for me to answer some of those?
Why don't we let Matt talk?
Sure.
Okay. Now, my apologies.
No, to answer, if you want me to respond to some,
I don't know if anybody else wants to testify.
I suspect there might be one or two people that want to testify. Does anyone else want to testify tonight? Would you raise your hands?
I can answer some of those questions, but.
Brad, you? Okay. All right. So then we want another person to testify. Okay. We'd like to let the staff answer your questions first.
Great. I'm happy to. Thank you.
Thank you so very much.
okay, so to answer your question, reference the push piece that the side businesses are talking about or that have felt or expressed to you, it's covered in my memo from previous and in my updated staff report, is in addition to the smoke 43rd Street, which is by the draft ordinance that you've got before you, or the ordinance before you, is Adams to Johnson, 50 feet north and south of 3rd. Those would be areas that were considered smoke-free. But in addition to that, this city council or the city ordinance codifies and pulls into Oregon health law the state statute piece, which does prohibit smoking within 10 feet of entrances, ventilation, windows, that sorts of things. So I understand the business's possible issues with the push piece of it, but under this umbrella, it takes and makes it illegal or unlawful for somebody to smoke in those areas as well. In prior issues or situations, it would not make it enforceable because it was a state health code. This holds it in and codifies state health code into city ordinance, which allows our employees or staff to enforce the ordinance, the smoke-free ordinance. Right now, the Clean Air Act, essentially.
Can I ask a question? So the reason why the previous ordinance, or excuse me, the reason why it was not enforced previously is the city police had the authority to enforce the state health code. Is that what you're saying?
That is correct.
And now by bringing in the state health code, you'll be able to not only enforce that. On 3rd Street, additionally, you go 50 feet off of 3rd Street campus, the health code part of the doors, the would probably red box and cupcake.
That would be correct.
In addition, one of the other issues that you raised, Councilor Captain, most of the restaurants whose entrances front on 3rd Street already have their employees smoking in the back of the building on the alleys or in the public parking lots. Most of the cars allowing their employees to smoke on 3rd Street already. So for most of the restaurants that are on 3rd Street, this would really have an impact on their employees to say they can stay connected. And I'll also say, this was not a conversation at the McMinnville board meeting this past week, and we heard some of that concern from both owner of Thistle and the owner of Packers Hotel. And their question to me was, is the city willing to be flexible and consider a future change in the code if there are any consequences of the language or actions forcefully, or actually trying to be responsive now to the task force that the city can be able to have about 9 months if in the implementation there are unintended consequences or negative impacts or not positive impacts that we want to see in the organization. I would expect that we would be having
And to add on, because there's something that people are sort of do, obviously, but some of the other commentary was why it's not included designated smoking areas so that we're not having unintended consequences of pushing people from one business to another. I think that the frustrations that I've heard are largely about the execution. It's nothing about the they all know, we all know smoking is terrible and puts people and but then the execution and without enough communication to other businesses that are being affected, and then this elimination, but without repercussion is leaving it open-ended for there to be more problems down the line once we get to an enforcement aspect of it. That's all feedback I've gotten.
Can I ask a clarifying question on that as well? Because my impression was that we did designate the spaces behind essentially parking lots. But as places where people can smoke, is that, do you run anything in education issue that we inform people where you can smoke here and solve the problem, or?
Well, I mean, it's
what we need.
I don't know what the solution is. I know what the concerns and frustrations that we have for it. And those areas, those parking lots, that's not the only place that people can go. And that's one of the concerns. There's not a definite, when people
because we've included the state statute, we'll take that one away.
That was the intent. That was the intent. But yeah, the intent of having codified that 10-foot area, I think there was some discussion about, do we even go beyond what the statute provides to 20 feet or 25 feet for different entrances? And as staff level, released the recommendation that we decided, let's take that 10 feet, but make it enforceable now in our code so that, you know, you're not going to be able to go 50 feet up and park in front of a business now, whether it's Red Fox or Thistle and Smoke. If you've got a street or section of Cowles or Ford where you've got an entrance every 20 feet apart, there's going to be effectively no smoking along that side of the street anyway, unless you find some very narrow gap. If they happen to be 22 feet apart, you've got a little 2-foot slot there that you can stand in and smoke, because every 10 feet from every entrance is now going to be part of this downtown enforcement process. And that 10 feet is citywide, it's statewide, but it will become citywide now from an enforcement standpoint for the police department. So that, I mean, that was part of the consideration that was given to those other businesses to keep it from being a problem that was simply pushed around to the sides of those businesses, was adding in that, making sure that additional 10-foot buffer was provided for those businesses, because it's not being enforced. And that was the intent of bringing it again into the ordinance.
And then I believe that there's a 30-day period?
Yes, yeah.
Go ahead.
We're not, there wasn't a recommendation in this ordinance that there be an emergency declared and immediate implementation, that it be a 30-day period prior to actual implementation, which is just more time for information.
Time for the police to inform people of what the rules are going to be, and, you know, start giving them warnings and things like that, just so they know what the actual parameters are.
Okay, and what do you see enforcement look like?
Well, ultimately, it's a violation. It's a Class D violation, fine. I would say, and I talked with Paul with County Health, and this 30-day, it's going to go beyond 30 days. This education window where we're going to be outreach. Our park rangers can enforce this downtown. Our officers can enforce this downtown. But I would envision the first 30 days prior to the ordinance becoming effective is that there's going to be a massive education piece by our staff to go out there carrying leaflets, pamphlets about a tobacco cessation program, those types of things. So that is the intent right now. Now, if we get to somebody that ultimately we continually have to tell, let's stop smoking, then we get to the enforcement piece. But by and large, this is going to be, much like with any new law, a very intense education campaign.
I have a couple of questions about signage. Is there going to be signage now on 3rd Street that says smoke-free 3rd Street? And then second question, are we going to have signage indicating where smoking is permitted? In light of Remy's comment, it'd be good for people to know here but not here.
Permitted anywhere it's not prohibited. But I think the chief's report talked about the signage issue, if you want to.
Yes, so the ordinance doesn't specifically say signage will be placed. In talking with the county health department, again, they're more than willing to offset the cost of signage. Obviously, it's got to be meet the city standards, the way the city wants to present it, but that is certainly in our initial and subsequent meetings have been something that the county health department said they would be willing to set up. Because I do think it's important, people come into our city that they know what you can and cannot do, what's okay and what is not.
I think that it might not be a bad idea, in addition to the signage, the no smoking signage on 3rd Street. If it is permitted, behind the buildings, it might not be a horrible idea to indicate that smoking is permitted there with signage. Just a suggestion, not a requirement.
I'd like to have
Jenny Burr.
I'd like to have Jenny come up and talk about the MDA position on this. I apologize, Jenny. Senior moment. Serious senior moment.
Jenny Berg, 1420 Northeast 5th Street, and I am wearing my McMinnville Downtown Association Board President hat at this time to just give you a little bit of, because there has been talk about the MDA and communication and whatnot, and the MDA did talk about whether or not to go out to the community. We felt that because this was something coming from the Downtown Safety Task Force and coming from the city, that it was not necessarily, we didn't want to, because we have members that are, that own the Blue Moon, that own the Oak, that maybe have a variety of thoughts on this matter, we didn't necessarily want to go in advance of with this idea that we have an agenda. So we had planned to, once something came from the council, that is when we would go and make that that outreach effort, that education effort. We did reach out to our members to say this is happening, this is going to be discussed in council, but we didn't go out to try and say, and we're going to vote this way, or we have this or that stand. I do know that board members are ready to tomorrow, if this passes, ready to go out tomorrow to make that educational outreach effort at that time. Thanks.
Is there any other testimony or any other closing comments?
She's had her hand up.
Oh, my apologies. That's all right. Talk to us. Introduce yourself.
I will absolutely do that. My name is Heather Miller. I own Local Flow Health Bar at 575 Northeast 3rd Street. I'm also on the MDA board and will, if this passes, be going out to help educate business owners on what exactly the ordinance means, as well as promoting our business owners to educate their staff and employees as respectful places to smoke and do what they need to do on their break times and periods. The MDA is also open to being a feedback resource for members and non-members downtown. If there are issues that arise, like Remy brought up, if people are congregating on those side streets or on 4th or 2nd Street, we're happy to take in that information once this passes and help to work towards mitigating that problem. So that's sort of our outreach stance post.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? No. Thank you very much. So,
No, go for it, please.
Yeah. Well, it's been overwhelming, the support of this ban from the people I've talked to. I've never heard anybody that's been against the ban or against smoking in general. So we know it's bad for our health, for sure. So that's what I found after talking to a lot of different people. But also, I like the idea of the ban being on 3rd Street and around the corners, the 50 feet, because if there's smoke, we know they're in violation. And it eliminates the question is, are they 9 or 11 feet from the opening or ventilated window spot? That must come up. And so I'm thinking that it's going to clarify a lot of enforcement issues because it's an area, it's no smoking, period. And if you're in violation after a certain period of time, you're going to get a citation. I like that a lot. I think it clarifies in people's minds much better. But also the city of parks is another factor that we haven't talked about that's in this bill, this ordinance. And I think that we should have signage there right away if we don't already, because that's a little bit different situation. You're having families get out curbside, get out onto the parks. They need to see another sign there besides the ones that are there that state the existing ordinances and hours and times and uses and everything, but specifically a non-smoking area for all city parks. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Anybody else? Okay, could we have the second reading of the ordinance?
Yes. This is the second reading of ordinance number 5054, an ordinance relating to smoking regulations in downtown McMinnville and city park areas, establishing McMinnville Municipal Code Chapter 8.32 and amending McMinnville Municipal Code Section 12.36.020.
Thank you, David. Could I have a motion, please, to adopt ordinance number 5054?
So moved.
So moved, second.
All right, Wendy and Ellen, okay.
Slide right in there.
Sign language doesn't do it. All right, Melissa, would you please poll the council, and I guess poll me last.
Aye. Counselor Irvin?
Aye.
Counselor Peralta?
Aye.
Counselor Reed?
Aye.
Counselor Sassons?
Aye.
Counselor President
Aye. I believe it passes by a vote of 6-0. Okay. So we are now officially to reports from councilors on committee and board assignments. Alan, tell us what's happening. Oh, sure.
Things that have been scheduled and not scheduled because of conflicts. And the airport commission is delayed again till September. We'll have a normal meeting in September. Also, the McMinnville Affordable Housing Task Force is being restructured tomorrow. Is that right, Heather?
We're doing a math exercise tomorrow.
Yeah, so no real affordable housing task force meeting.
It is a work session.
Work session, still invited to come, open to the public? Okay. That's better.
Remy?
July 9th, our homeless subcommittee will be meeting 4 o'clock here. The meeting runs 4 to until 5:15, in addition to the mapping fund tomorrow. Because that's tomorrow at 10 a.m. The mapping exercise.
Wendy?
We have not had an urban renewal advisory committee meeting, but we will have one in July. It will not be the first week, it'll be the second week. It's been delayed a week for the 1st of July. So the second week, second Wednesday. So I'll have more to report after that.
Good to know. Okay. Adam?
We adopted our budget for YCOM at our, I guess, 3% increase.
Yay.
And we likely won't have a meeting in July. There's nothing pressing on the agenda. Our TriTech system upgrade is on schedule after a switch out of project managers, so they mesh better with our YCOM team. And other than that, the only thing with that new update is each city's individual IT department will be responsible for how it interfaces with our mobile units. So I don't think that's really an issue with us having dedicated IT staff, but with some of our smaller users on YCOM, I think that could be an issue for some of them. But just working through that. And other than that, the city is helping out with fireworks, so come out and see the show.
Sal?
Mid-Valley Council of Governments had its quarterly meeting last week. We had a presentation on homelessness in the region. It was spiking in the last 2 years in rural America, particularly in the West. From 2007 to 2015, most of the growth in homelessness was happening in the cities. From 2015 to 2017, almost all of it is in the rural West. So everybody's in kind of the same boat in our region. Also, they talked about funding for Safe Routes to School grants, which are coming available that may be germane to some of the work that's happening on Davis Street this year. So I passed that on to Heather, and that's about it.
Would you like to address what happened to Visit McMinnville?
Sure. Visit McMinnville, it's a monthly board meeting. The primary focus was reporting on the budget and the work plan that had been adopted and presented to the council the previous council meeting. There was also a lot of conversation around the Visit McMinnville's effort to sort of convene regional tourism stakeholders to work with folks that were interested in doing more tourism promotion around Yamhill County, as well as our partners in the three-county area and the Willamette Valley Vineyard Association. Jeff Knapp has been a key member of that. He has a seat on the WAVA board now, and there's an ongoing effort of 25 different tourism stakeholders from around the region that have been convening to talk about how to better promote not just the wine industry, but tourism generally in the region.
Thank you, Jeff. Briefly on the Parkway Committee, there was discussion at this last meeting in regard to looking to the cities for funding. The focus was on looking at possibly asking for funds to buy land, which would be part of the overall bypass, by simply tying funds that cities might ante up for that. The discussion was that they would initially go to the county and to Newburgh, because if the county and the Newburgh are not interested in doing this, then there really isn't much point in the rest of us getting involved. The other thing that came out of it was that because this so much impacts Newburgh and overall the whole Newburgh-Dundee bypass affected all of the cities in the area, the county would probably be taking a much larger share if there was such a request for possible funding. So I'm just, right now nothing has happened, but be aware that that is in the discussion. So, Matt? Rich? Marcia?
I would just mention that on July 9th, the auditors for Marina and Company will be here, and that is their interim field work for the audit for fiscal year 2017.
Thank you. Heather? Nothing, Melissa? Nothing from David. Okay. Jeff?
So for each member of the council, I have for you a challenge coin commemorating our ongoing strategic planning efforts. You are among the first to receive those. I can't say you're the very first because it may be that the city recorder has one in her desk. Our goal is to get these in the hands of the folks who have helped us through the course of this process, and so over the next several weeks as we continue to do public outreach and engagement, we'll be getting these out as thank yous to our many stakeholders who've been involved, and I'll get some of them to you as well that you can hand out to folks that you think are deserving of the token. That's all I have.
Okay, if there's no further business to come before the council, I'm going to close the meeting. And then we are going to open the Urban Renewal Agency meetings. It's no rest for the wicked. All right, I'm calling the meeting to order, and we are going to look at resolution number 2018-3, a resolution adopting the budget for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2018, making appropriations and declaring the tax increments. Marcia.
This resolution adopts the budget for the Urban Renewal Agency. As you know, the Urban Renewal budget needs to be adopted by the Urban Renewal Agency Board. This resolution does so, and also makes the appropriations and declares the tax increment, which allows us to collect the taxes for the Urban Renewal area.
Okay, is there any council discussion in regard to the urban renewal budget? One more time, any discussion? Hearing none, I would ask for a motion to adopt the fiscal year 2018-19 budget, to make appropriations, and declare the tax increment for the McMinnville Urban Renewal Plan area. Did I hear a motion from Mr. Garvin?
Yes.
Okay.
Second.
So we have a motion from Adam and a second from Alan. Okay. So Counselor Alan Bruton moves and Counselor Adam Garvin seconds. I think I got that wrong. Counselor Adam Garvin and Counselor Alan Bruton seconds. We'll get it right yet. Counselor Adam Garvin moves and Counselor Alan Rudin seconds to adopt the resolution 2018-3 adopting the 2018-19 budget in the amount of $1,027,176 for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2018, to make appropriations in the amount of $1,281 and to certify to the county assessor a request for McMinnville Urban Renewal Plan area for the maximum amount of revenue that may be raised by dividing the taxes under Section 1C, Article 11 of the Oregon Constitution and ORS Chapter 457. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying nay. Hearing no nays, the resolution has passed unanimously by 6 in favor and none opposed. I believe there is no further business, and so we will adjourn the meeting at 8:30.